All right. See you, Chris. Thanks. Hey, bud.
Kevin, how are you?
I'm well. How about yourself?
Been running around today?
Always running around.
It keeps you young, doesn't it?
I don't know if it keeps me young, but it keeps me out of trouble. Let me put it that way.
Yeah, it does something good for you, right?
Hey, yeah.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
I guess we can say this is a
Christmas
podcast.
We're going to have a little bit of fun talking about Christmas, I guess. This is 12-2 podcast, of course, So, anyway.
We like to make sure that we help people understand the value of cognitive thought over emotion.
Exactly.
Right?
Yes.
I had twice this week, Kevin, I had the privilege of telling people who are in certain situations of conflict, etc., make sure that you remember that you can never counter negative emotion with emotion.
Okay.
It's not going to work.
Right.
It just
escalates.
Not going to work. Just escalate. Exactly. It escalates. Yeah. You've got to make sure that you find that cognitive thinking and find your groove and the logic that can kind of overcome whatever it is that causes the escalation of emotion.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Do you think this topic's going to get anybody emotional today?
I have no idea. I guess it depends on where you fall. But, Christmas is one of those interesting times. Of course, it's this huge, it's a huge thing around the world.
Gosh,
we've just grown over the years, and of course, we'll be off work. It's an opportunity to be with family and to celebrate the birth of Christ, the first Advent, which starts the church calendar, marching its way towards, of course, Easter.
Yeah, sure. And both of these events have origins that kind of come from different places and different angles, some of whom honoring to Christianity, some maybe not so, right?
Well, interesting, because of course what I've grown up thinking, was of course, Jesus was born in the spring because of, with the shepherds in the field, and the shepherds typically would have been in the field from March to November. Now, is it out of the realm of the possible that they could have been in the field in December? Absolutely not. They could have been there. What I find interesting, though, is of course we were told that, and then I've also been told that December 25th, or it ended up being established in December 25th to kind of co-opt some of maybe the pagan holidays, and in order for the emerging church that was coming into the Roman Empire, in order to maybe siphon off some of the pagans that were worshiping, false gods, or maybe make people more comfortable who had come out of the pagan religion into Christianity.
So sort of an evangelistic tool.
Maybe. But what I find interesting is Wesley Huff, who I would recommend to anybody to read. He was featured on Joe Rogan podcast. He's been on Ali Beth Stuckey. He's one of the young up-and-coming premier theologians. He is an expert in ancient text, specifically related to the Scripture. And he puts out these infographis, a lot of times on his social media. You can find him anywhere on, any of the social medias. But and one of them is Christmas.
Oh, really?
Have pagan origins. Oh. And he said, he grew up thinking that, it was a co-op. And he went. What he did was he went to research the historical information to see if, like many things that get co-opted, they lose their significance. But what he found very interesting is that no, Christianity for Christmas did not co-opt pagan festivals. That it was established by the early church very early in the church's birth, which I had never even
How
heard.
early do you think? Because I always thought around 300 or so, 4th century.
Yeah, well, 304, that 300 and 4th century. In fact, one of the calendars that they've been able to unearth and discover was around 354 AD, and it had Christmas on it.
How about that?
It had it. But what was interesting is when he said that he looked back at the original works, that December 25th was as Christ's birthday was established in early 200s AD.
Oh, really? That's soon, huh?
Yeah.
That long ago.
And maybe even a little bit earlier than that. And what you had was, in fact, what he found was that it may have been actually opposite, that some of the pagan holidays got moved to around Christmas in order to stem this growing Christian church in the Roman Empire. In fact, I think it's Pliny the Lesser, comments that the emperor was very distraught about the fact that the temples were being emptied because there was this rising group of people worshiping a different God, and Christians basically, that this church was being established. But what I find interesting is some of the early church fathers, theologians, they established this December 25th date. Back, the earliest is I think Hippolytus of Rome. He about like 204.
Wow, that's
AD,
soon, huh?
And then Sextus Julius Africanus.
Oh, well done, well done.
He writes this book, basically the chronology of biblical dates.
Okay,
and he established that Jesus was probably born in his chronology at the end of December, and how he came to and how he comes to that is the fact that he comes and he takes the story in Luke 1 of what is it Zacharias Zacharias, and he figures out the date that he would most likely have been serving in the temple, and then you have the 6 months before Mary comes to Elizabeth, and that would get you to March that conception would happen, and then you get 9 months later is December. And part of this comes from the ancient thought that if you were a holy or godly person, that the date that you died would correspond to the date that you were conceived, so that your life would be perfectly balanced.
Gotcha.
So that's the idea. So it's later kind of verified in the fact that they would have figured that Christ would have died of Passover, which would have been the end of March, most likely during that time, which would then, of course, correspond to his conception in March. And so you get to the 25th. So you have these. Cool. So you have these. Basically, three guys, like I said, Hippolytus of Rome, saying in about 204 that Christ was born on the 25th. You got Julius saying that it's on the 25th. And then you have Theophilus of Caesarea in the second century AD, because he died about 195 AD. Okay. He said that we ought to celebrate the birthday of our Lord on whenever day the 25th of December shall happen. And this was before 200.
And that was even before 200.
Yeah, that was even before 200 AD. Now, ultimately, it doesn't matter if Christ was born on the 25th or if he was born sometime in the spring. Ultimately, no, it's the fact that he was born. Yeah. But what it does do is it kind of starts destroying that idea that that the church went in and co-opted pagan celebrations in order to further the church that they had established early in the church history, that the 25th of December.
That's pretty interesting. That's really good. And you mentioned too, with the whole idea of when conception was, the idea of conception, death, if you're the righteous person, things coinciding there. Because for the most part, in that time, the celebration of life of someone, and I'm not talking about a funeral or memorial service, but the remembrance of was not their birthday like we have today. It's what's the birthday of the president, right? That we're going to recognize. It was the date that they died. Oh. And so that was another tradition that coincides with or aligns with what you just described, that whole idea of conception aligning with the date of death. There's a lot of consistency there, right?
Right.
But we've lost that over time, the understanding of that.
Yeah. I mean, and part of it comes back to the ancient, where when somebody died, they just, it was 100, like when Moses died, he was 120 years old. They don't give the month, day, and year he died. So that's where this idea that the more holy you were or the more righteous you were, that your conception date and your death date on the calendar would be closer
or more likely to align.
And of course, Christ being the Son of God, the early church fathers would have said that he is aligned.
Perfectly aligned, right?
Right.
Totally perfectly aligned.
But what's interesting is like in the 300s AD, 4th century, you have Augustus Hippo talking about, Augustus of Hippo talking about December 25th. Mm-hmm. You have Gregory of Nazarene talking about it, and Jerome even attesting to it. And what I find interesting is, so many times it's that the Roman celebration of, Saturnalia.
Yeah, Saturnalia.
Yeah.
With Saturn, the name of the planet, kind of the root of that word.
Right,
yeah.
And it was a celebration because Saturn was the god of the harvest or whatever, and so it was that kind of celebration. Mm-hmm. And it was always held 14 days prior to the beginning of the new year. Mm-hmm. And in the old calendar, there were 2 extra days in December, so that gets it to December 17th, not the 25th, but the 17th. And then what you find through history, they kind of expand that celebration to where it ends on the 23rd. But that's not until the 200s AD that they start expanding it, which is well after the early 200s AD, where where the church has already established that Christ's birthday is on December 25th.
And wasn't the 25th also there was a holiday there, Sol Invictus,
right?
Yeah,
the rebirth of the sun,
right? Yeah, which is the whole idea the sun is now coming back, and that's hard for us to think about in December because we think of December 31st, right, just a couple of days away. As the shortest day of the year.
Well, the 21st.
The 21st, I say. Yeah, 21st. Which is the day we see the least of the sun.
Right.
But we got to remember where we are, the sun's going to be different,
right,
et cetera. But yeah, that's an interesting
Do you know when
point
that was established? When the emperor established that?
Sol Invictus?
Yeah.
Around 300, right?
About 274 AD.
274,
which is about 70 years after, they first say, hey, Jesus' birthday is on the 25th.
There you go.
And
point proven.
Right. And the concept behind that was the fact, again, that they were trying to co-opt the Christian celebration of Christ's birth by saying, hey, we're going to have a celebration of the rebirth of the sun, S-U-N, versus the birth of the sun, S-O-N.
That's a really good point. You know what I think? I think that a lot of this, the idea of the church co-opting this, because it happened in a time relatively close to the time of Constantine being the emperor,
right?
When he was a follower of Christ, best we can tell,
right?
A well-meaning, legitimate follower of Christ who married the governmental institutions with the church. Now, he had good intentions, I think.
Right.
We learned some things about that. He learned some things about that. It didn't work too well, right? Maybe for a while, but for the most part. And I think that a lot of that, Kevin, a lot of the assumption would be that as he did that, with the Christian church with the pagan, I hate to use the term pagan, but that's a lot of what it was.
Right. Pagan government.
The pagan government.
Roman
pagan
government.
society. Yeah. That I think the assumption is that furthers. I think we make the assumption that co-opting of the holiday of the sun, the day of the sun, the Sol Invictus, into Christmas was a legitimate thing. I think that's another source of that.
Right, and the opposite is true.
Yeah,
and I think that is encouraging and it's exciting. And Wesley Huff, again, like he said, he always believed that it was, that the church had co-opted until he went back to the original text and started doing the study, and he found, hey, wait, they're saying that Christ's birthday was December 25th, 70 years before they even established this holiday.
Yeah, you've got to watch this podcast here this Christmas.
Right.
Dads, you can tell this stuff to your family and you will look like a genius. So well, you don't even have to tell them that Kevin told you this.
No.
Take credit for yourself.
Right. The other thing that I find interesting is this whole idea of the Christmas tree.
Yeah.
So many times people say, well, that was co-opted by the church because of the German paganism and Norse theology and the Celtics and the Druids, and they worship trees, and this idea that the church grabbed this idea of the tree and associated with Christmas because it was, again, trying to co-opt a pagan practice, a pagan belief in order to get people into the church. What's interesting is none of those religions ever had anything to do with an evergreen tree.
Right.
They all worship oak trees. In fact, the story of St. Boniface, he was out of England, and he had gone to the German states in about the 700s AD to preach the gospel. And of course, there was a lot of German paganism at this time, and they had a tree that was dedicated to Thor, and it was a huge oak tree, and he takes an axe to it and chops it down. And basically, he said, if your Thor's a god, he's going to punish me. And of course, no punishment. No punishment. In fact, he takes the wood of the tree and builds a cathedral to St. Peter from it.
Oh, wow. How about that?
And so so when people say that, don't just go, oh, okay, the Christmas tree, yeah, we co-opted it. No, because those religions focused in on the oak trees and not an evergreen. There's an apocryphal story that says after he chopped it down, he looked at an evergreen tree and said, "That's the tree of Christ," but there's no real verification for that.
Yeah.
But the Christmas tree comes about because in the German states, about 1500 AD, on December 24th, they would do these mystery plays, which they celebrated, or they basically did a play about Adam and Eve.
Okay.
And they would have a tree there, and they called it a paradise tree. And it was an evergreen tree, and they would put fruit on it, typically apples, to represent the tree of knowledge. And then they would hang the Eucharist on it to represent redemption.
Okay.
And what would happen, of course, is people would eat the fruit off of the tree during the play and the celebration, but then they would come back the next day and decorate that tree.
Oh, really?
In celebration of
cool.
Christ.
Yeah.
The other idea of course, there's the legend of Martin Luther when it comes to Christmas trees, that he was out walking, and in the winter he sees a beautiful forest of evergreen trees, and he sees the stars, over the sky, and he's in awe of it. So he wants to take a piece of that and bring it into his house. So the story goes that he chops down a tree and brings it in the house and puts lights on it.
Okay.
And for the most part, the idea of the Christmas tree stays within basically Central Europe,
right.
Germany, through the 15, 16, 1700s.
Because it really didn't become widespread until like the 19th century, I think.
Correct.
Right.
I mean, there was some, of course, in America because we had a huge, influx of Germans,
right.
at the establishment of the new continent. But it really gains traction when Queen Victoria marries Prince Albert, who is a prince of a German state, and he becomes, the regent in England. And of course, he brings this idea of the Christmas tree tradition and establishes it in the palace. And of course, whatever the queen does, that's kind of like, is going to be the next popular thing. And so, you have the people of England wanting to mimic what the Queen's doing,
they became the style.
The style. So they established the Christmas tree
Yeah.
within England, and of course, at this time, England is around the globe, so of course it spreads all around the globe.
Yeah.
But the idea of a Christmas tree has its origins in the church.
Yeah, you got your tree up yet?
Oh yeah.
Okay. How many trees you got?
Two.
We have two also.
Now, I will say I was in a house the other day. And literally every room.
Seriously?
Every room had a Christmas tree.
Wow.
I was like, dude, that's a lot of work.
That's a lot of work. My daughter has like 4. Gosh. So it's crazy.
Yeah.
She started doing this like in October,
Now, my best friend, he has a tree and he just leaves it up all year.
Does he really?
Yeah.
Not tacky.
With the lights on.
It's not tacky, right? Not tacky.
No. But what I thought was exciting, with this is none of this stuff, as honestly we've been told, because that's what the general idea was, is necessarily true, that this stuff is born out of the church, and we can embrace it and enjoy it. I know that some people get been out of shape because they go to Jeremiah 10. Verse 3 and 4, where it talks about don't cut down a tree and bring it into your house and adorn it with gold and silver.
Yeah.
Of course, Jeremiah is way before anything with Christmas has to do with.
For sure.
And Jeremiah is talking about carving an idol. He's not talking about a Christmas tree.
Right.
Tree. And some people like to take that verse and go, you should have a Christmas tree.
Demonize the Christmas tree.
Right.
Do you think maybe that So it sounds like that Huff's got it down pretty well. I wonder if this idea of the church co-opting the pagan traditions would have been just another way for maybe those who would spiritualize the Christian message. I understand what I mean by spiritualize. A lot of the early church fathers were indeed folks who would take the message of the Bible and they would spiritualize things. For example, Jonah really didn't wind up in the belly of a big fish. That was just an allegorical story to kind of illustrate a principle and a point. There were early church fathers who believed that, right? And that's what they would do it. I wonder if there was a movement afoot, and this is just totally, I have no idea as the answer to the question. It's a speculative type question. Was there even a movement back then to sort of dumb down the movement of Christianity? I'm sure there were movements like that might have sought to maybe delegitimize a bit of the Christian message by saying, no, see, they're having to pull in pagan stuff that just to make up something that really is not that real.
I wouldn't say that back then, but I would definitely say today.
Today, for sure.
That if we can delegitimize the idea that the church established these things, then we can kind of get to this idea. It's just another way to God, the oprification of religion. As long as you're sincere in what you believe, it doesn't matter what you believe. See, because even the early church brought in pagan practices in order to spread their message type deal. And I think that's just a dangerous thing to walk down.
It is.
But we do have to remember that at this time that you're going to end up with a lot of people who are illiterate or don't have access to the written word.
Exactly.
For a long time, the Bible's only in Latin or Greek, and not everybody speaks it. In fact, there's people that will get burned at the stake for translating it into English or French or whatever, and it won't be until the printing press comes about that you'll end up with widespread literacy. So, yes, I do believe that the church was effective in using symbols. In fact, I think the calendar that especially more like the Catholic Church or the Orthodox Church uses, that we as Protestants or Baptists have kind of gotten away from, was a way to help kind of drive points home, because they'll start with Advent, of course, before Christmas, which we celebrate. I mean, we do the Advent candle and stuff like that. And then, all the way through basically the calendar year, there is this celebration of what occurs in the New Testament.
Right.
And I think it's important. It gives us a rhythm to our life. And God established rhythms. I mean, he established rhythms by, hey, work 6 days, rest 1.
Yeah.
That was one of the rhythms he established. But I also think it's important that when you look back, even in the Old Testament, God establishes rhythms of celebration so that your mind is always brought back to what God has done. And I think that's important for us in the church, what God has done. With Christmas, it's the coming of Jesus. And then you come to Easter, and it's the death, burial, and resurrection. And then you have Pentecost, where the Spirit comes and the word goes out through the world. So I think it's important that we always, as believers, come back to what God has revealed to us in His Word.
A lot of feasts to remember, right? In the Jewish community, in the Old Testament, and even today. Yeah. Right? Traditions they're held. And so that's a beautiful thing, to say the least.
And I know that some people say, well, God didn't establish Christmas as something to be celebrated, but it's not necessarily that God needed to establish it. Yeah. I think it's an opportunity that it's important that we do celebrate Christ's coming, the first advent, so that we can look forward to the second advent.
Right. And, psychological studies place a lot of emphasis on just the discipline of ceremony, whatever that ceremony might look like, being so important in helping people let go of the past and moving forward.
Oh, that's good.
So and so you kind of see that with Christmas. I mean, it's kind of cool, I guess, that it's positioned right there at the end of the new year. I mean, I hate New Year's Day. I hate it. It's the worst holiday in the world. The weather's always bad, and it's like you got to go back to doing what you were doing. But, having Christmas there, that's really the time, I think, when you can really kind of turn the page and say, hey, moving forward,
right?
Christ with a positive attitude. Christ came to do that,
make all things new.
Yeah, he moved his entire economy forward. God did through the birth of the Christ child.
I also find it interesting that we celebrate it during the darkest time of the year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
because the light had come.
Yeah,
and light shines brightest when it is the darkest, and I find that inspiring.
Yeah.
And I find that kind of cool.
Yeah.
So,
all the above.
Just if you say that, hey, because Christmas isn't mentioned, just remember in John 10, Jesus is going to Jerusalem for what? In John 10, he goes to Jerusalem for the celebration of the dedication of the temple, which they started celebrating during the intertestamental period between Malachi and Matthew, with Maccabeus, defeating the Greeks or whatever the case is, and reestablishing the temple worship, which becomes Hanukkah. So we see Christ even partaking in a holiday that wasn't necessarily spelled out in Scripture, because of course they didn't start celebrating that until after.
Right, and look, the Hanukkah thing, the many of us, the Christian faith, we don't give it a second thought. But Hanukkah's a big deal. It is a huge deal,
right?
Among the Jews and
among those of the Jewish faith. And
it really should be for us, just from a historical perspective, understanding what happened, because that was so critically important to the temple, to the defeat of evil rulers in the line of Antiochus Epiphanes, who was one of the earlier Hitlers, for the most part.
And it does remind us, though, that God was going to protect His people so that Christ could come. And so he preserved them through all the turmoil of, the Babylonians, the Assyrians, the Greeks, and eventually the Romans.
Yeah.
And he works it out to where at the appointed time, the perfect time, Christ comes.
Wouldn't you have liked to have been able to kind of peek into the spiritual world during all those contests, knowing that Satan's gig was going back to Genesis 3 and the curse, and he knew that there would be a Redeemer come from a woman,
right?
And doing everything he could to stamp out the lineage of that woman. I mean,
failed.
And he failed. Even to the extent of David, we think, even further on down the line with David, with what he did with the adultery and with the murder of Uriah, and just to kind of see how Satan knew that David was the guy.
Yeah.
And I think that's another reason why we at Christmas time, we think of Bethlehem, obviously the town of David. Right. And why was David so special? He did this adultery and the murder and all that. But he was a guy, Satan was after him continually.
From the very beginning,
From the very beginning. He knew that God had a plan for him, particularly, I would think, when he was chosen, right?
Yeah.
The least of the sons of Jesse, and Satan stepped up the assault. And what spiritual warfare would have been around David. And we wonder sometimes, how could he wind up being the man after God's own heart? Well, if we understand everything that he had going against him in the spiritual realm and what he had to deal with, I think we can understand a little bit more about that. Yeah, good stuff.
Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this one. This is on Christmas. It was a fun one. So anyway,
you brought some good stuff. You're a pretty smart guy.
No. I just can read. I can read and watch videos.
Well, since you and I were texting this morning before 5 a.m., which is when I know you do a lot of yours, I do a lot of mine. You start even a little bit earlier than I do, and that's pretty darn early. So
sometimes I can't sleep.
I know. Yeah, you can't sleep. You might as well do something productive, right?
Might as well. Yep.
Might as well.
So anyway, well, I'm going to wish everybody in the audience a Merry Christmas.
Yeah, Merry Christmas to everybody. Yeah.
I'll tell you, a perfect gift is let somebody know about the 12-2 podcast.
I like that. That's a good one, man. Good one. Okay. Yeah, they can get it free too.
Yeah,
that's a good one.
Yes.
Cheap on you. Really
right,
is.
right. So we look forward to the next year.
Yeah,
so
looking forward to it, Kevin. Thanks, buddy.
Anyway,
Happy Merry Christmas to you and your family.
Yeah.
All right.
Bye.
Thanks so much.